On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very exclusive treat. He's a tenured full professor at California State University, Fullerton, the co-director of the Center for Sport Performance and founder and director of the Biochemistry and Molecular Exercise Technology Laboratory, just to name a few. He is a dynamic human performance scientist with a PhD in human bioenergetics and over 100 peer-reviewed publications and presentations. No big deal. He's worked with elite athletes, including All-Star, All-Pro, MVP, Cy Young, Olympic gold medalists, major winners, world title contenders across the UFC, MLB, NBA, NFL, boxing, Olympics, and military special forces. And he is the go-to guy for upgrading your performance, bar none. His ability to make complex health and wellness topics more easily digestible is off the charts. And he's a juggernaut in all facets of life and a terrific human being. Please welcome the informative, wise, and unique, the brilliant and handsome, abundant Dr. Andy Galpin. How you doing, Doc?
Holy cow, man. I have that's a promo cut right there.
You feeling good? Nice and elevated?
Man, it's geez, I've never had such a verbose and robust introduction. So yeah, man, incredible. I'd say your team writes well and cuts you a nice script there. So yeah. Good job to whoever put that on paper.
I was going to say, I wish I can give credit to the team. When it comes to this stuff, I'm extremely intentional, and that was all me. I'm so glad I did well by you, but as I like to say, it's your story. You wrote it. I just said it.
Yeah, well, here's what I can say, man. That extra effort you're putting into that matters. So good on you to take the time. Most people just do the same canned shit.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just don't care. They ask for file. I'm like, whatever, because you can write the same stupid stuff anytime. So the extra effort and intention is appreciated.
I appreciate you saying that. I received that, and your reaction was well worth it. So I'm excited to have you on the show today. For our audience and listeners, in case you're not familiar, my best suggestion is to do a deep dive. Check out all of his content, all the awesome stuff that he has going on. What I think is most valuable today is we just have an unbelievable conversation. Before we dive in, we're going to get a little weird. You ready for me?
Bring it.
What is your superpower, Dr. Andy?
Storytelling.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Sure. I can actually sort of tell a story if that helps. I remember several years ago, we were working on a project really hard that I wanted to create, and it just got pulled out from under the rug on us, just kind of out of nowhere. And I was like, man, okay. And I remember just laying on my floor in my living room and just being like, we were about to have our next meeting, and I'd done all this work for years, and just got, on the snap of a finger, got taken all away. And there's just no recourse. I was like, man. And I just lay there and I just started thinking, like, well, why did I even want to do this in the first place? And just used what most people would refer to as first principles, right? You just go back to the core in the beginning. It's like, why did I even care? Why am I hurt right now? And like, what do I wanted to do out of it? And just try to extract the part that I wanted to do, and then just do that. And as I lay there, I remember thinking back to a previous thing I heard my wife say when she was actually making fun of me. And I think she was saying it to a friend of hers or something, but she just said, like, oh, Andrew, you're just a storyteller. And like what she was trying to say in a funny way was just like, you can't just answer a question directly. You have to give the background and make sure everyone knows the inflection points and why it matters. And you have to season everything, right? Not necessarily like embellishing and lying, but just making sure that the thing lands as appropriately would. And she was also like actually just making fun of me because it was a friend or something. I can't remember who it was. And I don't know why, but that in my head, that just popped in as like, your storyteller. And I just started thinking, I was like, you know what, you're absolutely right. So when I'm writing a grant, I'm just trying to tell a story. When I'm publishing a paper, I'm trying to tell a story. When I am teaching, the reason I've done the things I have done in there and had the success in that avenue is because I've just not taken the content and put it back out there, but tried to make it into a story. And same thing with my athletes, same thing with running companies, as you are certainly well know, Craig. This is advertising, this is marketing, this is silly. You're all just storytelling, right? Whether you want to connect with a friend, whether you want to court a spouse, this is all storytelling. And I thought about that for a while. I'm like, well, that's actually the thing. I'm not the best scientist in the world. I'm not the best coach in the world, but what I am very, very good at is finding and creating a story and getting a craft over. So I would say that's my expanded answer to the thing I'm probably the most talented at for me personally.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I can relate because just like the introduction, right? I wanted to go that extra mile to make you feel going to tell a little bit more of a story than just regurgitate. And it seems, and honestly, from following your content, so which is extremely helpful, it's you do that. It's not just, these are the facts. Tell a story, extract some lessons, give some analogies of what, and what that does is it captivates people and it separates you and it makes the content much more fun and digestible to consume.
Yeah, well, I'd actually say that's only convenient in a sense that I actually didn't do this. I'd love to be able to say that it was, for to gain more followers, to be better for the audience. And that's the honest answer is I started developing those things for strictly personal reasons. I realized very quickly into college that I did not have the most horsepower upstairs relative to everyone else in my class, right? So despite all the accolades you hear there, I'm generally not very smart in terms of memory, fact recall, things like that. It's not my biggest skill set by far. In fact, I would say I'm like average or below average at best in there. And so the only way I could get through academically the courses I did was to create a story in my own brain about the information. And so then when came time to start teaching, it's the same thing. I was like, I couldn't remember all that little information, especially when there was a course that I hadn't taught for a couple of years or something. I'm like, man, how am I going to not forget this in the middle of class? So I just had to craft uh, lectures and experiences in the room and a thing where it reminds me of the next thing coming up. Oh, that's right. It reminds me of that. And then get to that point, and that's okay, great. And so I spent tremendous detail creating the PowerPoint, the lecture, the experience, the flow, way more time than I should have spent on that actual environment. And I would love, again, to say it was for the student experience, but it was 100% so that I could make sure I remembered everything I needed to say. And then, like, there's a little part of it. I was like, okay, this will also make it a better experience. But really, it was for me. And so I would say the same thing when I'm trying to remember something in a paper or a technique in a laboratory or whatever the thing is that I've used with an athlete in the past. I'm creating a story for me, so I can remember my own damn brain.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I want to acknowledge you. I love the way you articulated that. I didn't have the most horsepower, right? And that's something that I can relate to as well. Like, I'm not the most talented really in anything, but I work really hard. I'm resourceful, I'm creative, I'm determined, I'm curious, and a lot of those attributes which I think you need to be successful, I think are available to most people. And talent or natural ability will only get you so far. So kudos to you for creating that system, so to speak, with the storytelling for you. And now look, now you're impacting so many with that style.
Yeah, it's fortunate. It worked out very well for me that the world happened to want the thing that I was interested in, or at least some small portion of it,
Yeah.
and the stuff that I want to do. And because the reality of it was when I actually just sort of wrap this point up, when that project left me, that's the reason I created my YouTube channel, is because I realized again what parts of it I wanted to do, and I said, why don't I just go do that? I don't want to do the sales thing. I don't care at all about forming a company. I don't want to deal with price. Like, I didn't want to deal with any of that part of business stuff. I just really didn't care for it. I'm like, all I wanted to do was take the information I had and the way that I could package it together, because I felt like I'd never seen that before. And I felt like if I was a student, I would have wanted that. And then I just thought it's so silly that I'm not going to be able to do this because the fact of I don't want to write sales copy and do marketing and lead gen and like all these things. I'm like, why not just make it and give it away? Who cares? So that's what I did. It turns out a lot of people like that. So that's what I did. That's what that thing will always be. But I really just did it because I'm like, if these are the barriers to entry, why are you so worried? Don't let other people who want to make a big business out of this and collect emails, and just go do the thing you want to do. And I didn't really care, and still to this day, do not care if a video has 6 views. I get this comment constantly, like thousands of times. I can't believe you only have this many subscribers. I can't believe you only have this many views. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I really just don't care. Because if 7 people watched that video, probably 6.5 were like, this was the greatest thing I've ever seen. So like, I really, really do not care about that aspect for that particular project. So it's just very rewarding to put those things out there, and the responses of the people who do watch it, it's insane. So then that's all I want to do with that. So happy as possible for that project, and we'll always love doing those things.
Yeah, a couple things to unpack. But number one, for the audience, he's being pretty humble. He does have an awesome following, and I know you're just getting warmed up. But I love what you're all about, brother, and I can relate to it. adding value is priority number one, right? And if one person, or just me and you right now speaking, right? If just one person breathes different oxygen because you and I showed up today and got deep and had a great conversation, that's the real ROI. And I totally appreciate it about you. For the audience that's watching right now, in addition to listening, you're wearing a pretty cool hat right now with the word rapid on it. I know that's your baby. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, sure. So this is let me tell you a story rather than tell you what it is. This is what I do, right?
Hell yeah.
So a number of years ago, I was dealing with a professional athlete. This is a UFC fighter, very highly known, and we were just running into some roadblocks, and I just was not getting the stuff I needed to get out of his physiology. And specifically in this case, we were doing some pretty in-depth blood analysis and urinalysis and things like that, and things just weren't going for the first time ever. I'm like, man, why is this not working? And so, what I typically do in those situations is like, hey, it's just this, let's get on the phone with everybody I know who's really good at this and get their opinion, pay their consulting fee. I never ask, for a free thing. It's just like whatever it costs. And so I knew this guy, Dan Garner, and I had worked with Dan in the past with I can just say it, Brian Callen, the actor. And so same thing, Callen had a thing going on. This was many years before, actually psoriasis. And I can say this because Brian's told this story 100 times, like, on publications and stuff like that. So he told it on Rogan like 5 times. So it's out there. It's not a big deal.
Hmm.
And so we did all the things, and typically we've had pretty good success in that as well, and it wasn't working. And I suspected, man, there's something going on here. And I know a guy who's really world class in this area, and that was Dan Garner. So we reached out to Dan. Dan nailed it, found out exactly what was going on, and then fixed it. And with a handful of weeks, and this has been years, I had the psoriasis taken care of. You don't cure psoriasis, but it was like, basically symptoms were totally gone. And it's been years, and it's gone. And so I had already known of Dan, and I was impressed with his work on that one. So then fast forward years go by with this UFC fighter, totally different issue, but I was just like, hey man, let me get your head on this one. No, I'll pay the consulting fee, and it was pretty high at that point. But I'm like, I don't care, whatever it is, get this guy figured out. And we worked together, and then right afterwards, I called him. I was like, dude, you are phenomenal at these handful of aspects of coaching, and I think you're pretty weak in these areas, and I'm weak in the exact opposite, and phenomenal in the other ones. Why are we not working together? And he's just like, I have no idea. Like, let's just work together. We're like, great. And we did that, and the things just exploded, and things took off. And and I've always had so much demand for non-athletes to work with me. And I've always said no. And so we sort of developed like, man, why don't we put it together a system and build a company where people can do this and get this high profile athlete experience, but in a more systemized way that we can actually. And so we built that company, and that was Rapid Health and Performance. And so we've done that, and now we do have a large number of high profile professional athletes in there, but the vast majority are the average, non-athletes. So some that are like, kind of, I'm not a pro athlete, but we had 3 people from Goldman Sachs yesterday start. So like people like that. We have some people who want to do triathlons. We have some people who like don't exercise, have never exercised in their life. We have men, we have women, we have 25-year-old folks, we have 65-year-olds. It doesn't matter. But if you want to take a complete and deep dive into everything, most comprehensive evaluation of your physiology possible, and then receive very high precision solutions for that, and then be coached and guided the entire way. That's what we built that program. And what we kind of set out to do is to say, look, we don't do medicine. I'm not an MD. If you want to know what your risk factors are for cardiovascular disease, I'm not doing anything like that. But if you're healthy-ish, right, within reason, and you want to optimize performance, then like that's what we do. And so it turns out there's a lot of people that want to do that. So we have a very long wait list at this point. It sells out, been sold out for forever. But yeah, it's going phenomenally well. So it's been a very fun venture to try to sort of take what we have had so much success with these pro athletes doing for many years, and be able to provide a similar service to folks who, again, really want to push that boundary of saying, yo, what is it I can really do physically? Where can I get to? And just kind of want to know, right? Of like all these years wondering, like, how good can I possibly feel? Typically, we see folks who have been to the ringer. I've done blood work, but my doctor says like everything looks fine. Like, I don't want to know if everything looks fine. I want to know how to optimize, as much as you can with all aspects. So we're not going to give you just a supplement plan. You're going to get a very high precision nutrition profile. So this is all the way down to the micronutrient. This is not macros and calories, micronutrient based nutrition. You're going to get training programs, recovery, sleep, breath work, meditate, whatever it is we think is needed to optimize your physiology. Exactly like I do when somebody comes to me and says, I have a world championship I need to win in 6 months, whatever it takes. And that's what we do. The whole complete circle is put together. So it's a pretty unique program. There's nothing like it out there, and it's done pretty well.
I love all this, and I think of high achievers, and I'm happy that you're helping other people now, not just necessarily in the octagon or on the field, so to speak. I'm curious, like, are you involved with all the clients at Rapid, or can the business
Oh
kind of,
yeah,
you can?
no,
You
yeah, that's you're gonna get what you're paying for is Dan and I.
okay?
So you're gonna get in like Dan. We have a full team, and you have a full dedicated coach and customer service, like all that kind of
Concierge,
thing. We
yeah,
send people to your house and take care of all that stuff for you. All those things, little concierge, if you will.
yeah.
But what you're paying, you're going to get Dan and I are going to be ones that pull up your labs and pull up your stuff and your tracking and everything, and we're going to orchestrate the program, and that's what you're getting. So it's your chance to work with me. It's the only way.
That's it, baby. And we're gonna put that in the show notes and all that. And this is just straight off the cuff. I know it's a loaded question, so I imagine you can't give like a definitive answer. But is there a common thing that you see amongst all of the high achievers that's something that really stands out that you need to kind of go in there specifically and help them with, like some sort of limiting belief or something?
Man, I get that question so much, and I wish I had
Yeah.
one, but it really isn't, because the way our philosophy is, we look for what we call your performance anchors.
Mhm.
So these are things that are dragging behind you, slowing you down, right? And so typically when you think of these high performers, the analogy I like to give is, if imagine you're on you're driving a car downhill. Say you're in like San Francisco and you're going on one of those crazy hills, right? And you're like, yo, I gotta go faster. I feel fine. The car's driving, I want to go faster. People's inclination is to hit the gas. My inclination is to look at your left foot first and see if it's sitting on the brake. And if all I have to do is get your foot off the brake, you're gonna go faster. And you're gonna do it with less wear and tear, and you'll be more gas efficient. After that, if you're still cruising mega fast and you want to go faster, now we can hit the gas pedal and start pushing the things, right? You're willing to lose some efficiency, fine, great. So all we do first, and the overwhelming majority of people, we just find those 2 to 5 performance anchors. You pull those things up, and then you just let physiology do what it does, and people just explode. So those performance anchors, sometimes it's a micronutrient deficiency, and it's a very simple fix. Sometimes it is a complete overhaul of their daily schedule. Sometimes it is, hey, look, we got to refer you out. You have psychological trauma, and that's not what we do. Sometimes it is breath work. Sometimes it is, sometimes there's like 1 or 2 things. And then sometimes, to be totally candid, it's like, well, all right, this isn't great. This isn't great. This isn't great either. This isn't great either. This isn't great. We just kind of have to chomp at the bit here, and eventually knock this thing down. Um, so that I don't, there's not like, it's not sleep. It's not, oh, you're eating carbs. It's not like,
Yeah.
gluten. Like there's no, anyone that says that is either a complete liar, or they've never actually worked with people.
Yeah.
Because like I've worked with a whole bunch of high performers, and I can tell you, can't, it's never, ever that simple for that many people. Might be simple for one person. There might be, and that's happened plenty of times. It's just like, one thing, and all of a sudden, boom. Easy example of that is, we had an individual with low testosterone. Okay, couldn't get it figured out. Couldn't get it figured out. We don't use, by the way, the drugs of any kind. Not that I'm against them, but like, again, we're not medical, so I'm not giving you. You want a TRT clinic, go somewhere else. It's not what we do, right? Anyways, a long troubleshooting process found out eventually he was extremely sensitive to the pollen from a particular tree that was in his neighborhood. Found that thing, got that out of there, testosterone doubled. Like, oh, amazing. Okay, so there's sometimes are those like,
Quick
and I
fix.
know that's like pitch wise, sales wise, that's how you get people to sign up. Like you just answer that question with like those examples. But that's honestly not the truth. That was a pretty rare one. Most of the time it's like, we did this, this, and this, then all of a sudden they come back and they sign up again, go through it, and all of a sudden their numbers are off the chart.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be very simple, or it can be complex depending on the person.
No, I appreciate the candidness. It's not a one size fits all. It's a case by case. Totally get it.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we take 500 biomarkers. We take your stool, we take your urine, take your saliva, take your a whole bunch of blood, because like I'm searching for everything. I want no things left unturned. I want all the clues and to figure out which ones are noise and which ones are not, rather than just, hopping in and taking genetics or hopping in and taking one blood panel or whatever. You're going to miss stuff. So.
I love this, brother. And I want to make the most of our time here because you're just a fountain of information. And I want to get so much value to the audience. So I'll hit you with a couple topics I think will be very beneficial. Oftentimes I see you talk about the mind-muscle connection. Can you tell us exactly what the deal is with that?
Sure, it's exactly as it sounds, right? So it's a connection you have between your conscious mind and your musculature. And I think what you're probably referring to is exercise efficiency here, meaning there's kind of a couple of ways you can exercise. So imagine you're going to lift some weights. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, what your goal is. And, you're going to do 3 sets of 10 at 50 pounds. Great. You can do 3 sets of 10 at 50 pounds. You can also do 3 sets of 10 at 50 pounds where you take a quick moment before you start, you focus, and you think about that muscle that's going to contract. Let's say you're doing, bench press. It doesn't matter. 50-pound dumbbells, and you're thinking about your pecs, because that's what you want to emphasize, and you're connecting your mind to your pec, and you're squeezing, you're feeling contraction, you're visualizing the contraction of your pecs, you're visualizing them growing, all those things. That's the mind muscle connection. And the science is always been a little bit missing for that stuff. It's sort of just like, who cares if you do the same amount of work, same amount of work. More recently, it's indicating the opposite, which is the mind muscle connection is a huge advantage for those training. And anyone in the like hypertrophy bodybuilding physique world will have told you this for 40 years. But the science is emerging to suggest that actually is beneficial. So what I would typically tell people is, look, most of you are probably just motivated enough to get to the gym, but that's like your motivation is that's about as high as it gets, right? And or you don't have a lot of time. You're super motivated, but you don't have time to train 6 days a week for 2 hours, and you probably don't need so. Great. In either of those cases, it still behooves you to just spend a quick second focusing on what you're trying to accomplish and ensuring the quality of every repetition over just checking the box to say you did your 3 sets of 10. So I would rather you do 1 set of 10 or 1 set of 5 where you have a strong mind muscle connection. You're focusing on contracting what needs to be contracted at very high execution. And this is similar to a concept of intent. And so if you look at with mind muscle connection here, so I've been describing generally outcomes of muscle growth, right? So this is how you optimize muscle growth. Well, the same thing is shown for actually power development. And the velocity or speed at which you actually achieve, right? Say you're trying to go fast, is actually not necessarily more important than your intent to go that fast. So as long as you're intending to go fast, even if you're not going faster, you will see greater improvements in speed and power development. And so what you're seeing is for either outcome here, intention and quality really, really, really matters. I can't say it matters and volume doesn't, and for you, it's not just like, as long as your quality there, the repetition count doesn't matter. That's not true. I'm simply saying they're both really important. And most people will check the box off and get the numbers done, but less people will pay attention to be intentional. So I think we need to emphasize that part of it more. And if you don't have the mental juice for the whole workout, okay, cool, I get it. Happens to me all the time too, right? No worries, kids, late, work, whatever. Cool. Just be intentional with what you can get done and then leave. Just do shorter stuff, but really focus and get a high quality training session in with what you can do and then get out of there. That's much better than just ticking out the boxes.
I think that's beautiful, brother. And I had Stan Efferding, the Rhino, on this week. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Oh, of course I am. That guy's he's amazing.
Yeah,
What a sweetheart.
Yeah, exactly. And he said something to me that kind of piggybacks on what you just said, and I loved it. And he's like, "There's no real such thing as reps and sets, right? Because like, what's to say 12 reps means anything? It's when your body starts to feel a struggle, and then you push through that." And I thought that was mind blowing. And
Yeah,
also,
that's all an illusion. It's
yeah,
all an illusion. Totally false, right? So think about what you're actually trying to do. You're trying to stimulate adaptation in the muscle, right? This
right.
is just requires stress. You think the body knows if it did 3 sets of 10 or 3 sets of 6 or 4 sets of like that doesn't matter. What you're simply trying to do is cause an insult into the tissue. So whether you're here's a more tangible example. If you say we're doing that 50 pounds, right? And you did 70 pounds instead, 50 versus 70. It doesn't matter to the muscle if you're contracting 50 with the same force you're contracting 70 with. It would be equal, because at the muscle's perspective, it's contracting with X amount of newtons. It doesn't have any idea. In fact, you could go even more direct. You could go to 10 pounds and get theoretically the same thing done if you're contracting equally hard, as long as you were able to put that. Now, one of the reasons you add load is because it's hard to consciously contract your muscles as hard as possible. You need that feedback, which says not enough, not enough, not enough, not enough, more. And it's incredibly difficult to do that. This is a neurological phenomenon that we describe as, it's sort of the difference, right? So here's what happens. I'm going to go like kind of quickly into neuromuscular physiology here.
Please.
So in order for you to move as a human, most people think that's muscle. It's actually bone. Your bone is what moves you through the world, right? And so all you have to do is move bone. Trust me, I'm coming back to the point here. Now, in order for you to move bone, this requires three specific things. One, there has to be some sort of signal from the central nervous system. Could be your conscious brain, like pick my hand up right now, you thinking about it. Could be like to be somatic. It could just be autonomic. It could just be something in your spinal cord. It could be a reaction. Hit your thing, you pulled up, right? Doesn't matter if it's a conscious or subconscious thought. There is some sort of central nervous system activation that goes out through the peripheral nervous system, right? So central being spinal cord, brainstem, brain, peripheral going like all the nerves that go out to from your central nervous system out. Okay, it doesn't matter. That's all the nervous system. So the nervous system then has to tell muscle. And the nerves go into skeletal muscle. And remember, each one of your muscles is made up of millions and millions and millions and millions and billions of individual muscle cells. So those are innervated, is what it's called, by the nerve. So the nerve tells the muscle to contract. When the muscle contracts, it does only in one fashion. It contracts fully with 100% effort. There is no way to throttle that contraction. It can contract. It's called the all or none principle. It contracts. It's a light switch. It's not a dimmer. Flicks on or flicks off. This is it. There is no way to contract a muscle fiber at 65%, 70, 80%, whatever. So the only way that you can increase the total amount of force or down regulate the amount of force production in a whole muscle is to increase or decrease the amount of muscle fibers that are being turned on or off. Because remember, the individual fiber itself is only on or only off, right? So what happens here, and these are called motor units, by the way. So the nerve and all the fibers that it turns on is one motor unit, and you have just all kinds of motor units around in a muscle. When you then decide you want to produce more force, you have to activate more motor units. If you say, hey, less force here, tone it down a little bit, you turn off some of those motor units. Well, the only way really to increase motor unit recruitment is by increasing force demand. And this is why it's incredibly difficult to actually produce more force in a muscle, contract harder, if you don't actually have a higher external force. Now, there is some actual cognitive control over here, right? You could lift up, again, 15 pounds submaximally, and you could lift up 15 pounds with more effort because you have some conscious control of turning on motor neurons. This is a learned thing. So one of the major adaptations to strength training is independent of muscle, and it is simply you learning how to turn on your motor units. It's a huge adaptation. This is one of the things that explains how you can get much stronger without adding any muscle size, right? So you have conscious control somewhat of that ability. And so what we're saying is really you have two ways to improve the muscle quality. One is to simply add more force requirement, add more weight. And that's what most people focus on. But the other way is to just try harder. And most of it's going to come from adding more weight. But if you just contract and focus and think more on that, you can learn to turn those motor units on sooner, faster, and more of them, and to have more control of that. And so that's what really Stan and I are referring to. We're saying like there is some conscious control here. And so there's a lot to be said for just checking off the box is what I keep saying, right? Of like, I did this much weight for this many reps, but you're leaving gains on the table. And there's a difference. You can actually measure this, by the way. So the last thing I'll say is, imagine doing like a leg extension test and you can do 100 pounds. That's the most you can lift. Great. Well, then I can put actually electrodes on your quad, have you do that 100 pounds, turn those electrodes on, and I could see that you could do 150 pounds. Okay. So in this case, the difference between what you can do when it's your brain only is 100 pounds. The difference between what your muscle's actually capable of is 150. That's a 50-pound difference.
Huge.
That actually explains that there's a technique we have there, but that is saying, hey, look, you're not even close to your potential here. We're not even talking about increasing the actual ability of your muscle. We're just talking about your ability to produce the force that's already there. That's what you get when you train your mind to have that better connection there. And so there's a huge potential for gain that's on the table for most people by just focusing on the quality more. And that's also, again, what Stan is referring to when he's saying, like, this is just fake and arbitrary. Like, it's not really real. There's no 12, 13, it doesn't matter. The muscle doesn't know that. It just knows stimulus and result.
This is so good. And I love how passionate and excited you get when you lean into this stuff. And I remember a quote by Muhammad Ali when someone was asking, like, how many sit-ups can you do? He's like, I only start counting when they hurt. And it makes me think about that.
Yeah, one quick note on that. I know you're didn't really mean it this way, but in case someone interpreted it this way, is you certainly don't want to think about exercise quality being how bad it hurts. Right. That's a very poor, how sore you are. Actually, the research is clear here. How sore you are does not predict at all how much muscle you will gain. How fatigued you are, how hard the workout was, how long you laid there catching your breath or threw up does not predict how many, the level of improvement in VO2 max or fat loss will happen, etc. Now, there is a little bit of a line here, right? You have to work hard at some point, but don't associate the more it hurt, the better the workout. That actually eliminates the idea of quality.
Wow.
So we want to be a little bit careful there.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I just said that and then you countered with that, because I imagine there's a big misconception. People don't think they got a good workout unless they're in a lot of pain or fatigued.
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly why I want to jump on that, because I've dealt, that comes up so much and so frequently. There is, again, go back to kind of first principles. What are you really trying to get done? And your level of discomfort is not necessarily the same level of stimuli that happen in muscle. And the stimuli is what's causing the adaptation, right? So, easy example. If you were to walk a mile or run a mile, which one do you think burns more calories? Walking a mile or running a mile?
Running.
It's the same. You did a mile either way. The total work, remember, calories are work. So you walk a mile, you run a mile, it's irrelevant. This is a similar thing to saying, what weighs more, a pound of feathers or a pound of rocks?
Same.
You,
But
you the work is to go there, right? Now, on one case, it took you 15 minutes. In one case, it took you 6. Now, like, okay, there is actually some differences between when you're landing versus walking, like some subtle things like that. Like, I know the real answer, but the conceptual point here is that's actually a misnomer, right? A little bit of there's some post-exercise oxygen stuff. Like, you're splitting hairs here. Really, the point is the work is done. Now, if you choose to do it in a lower intensity fashion, walking, and it didn't quote unquote hurt, that didn't really make a difference when you running a mile as fast as you can and then throwing up for an hour afterwards. It's pretty dang close to the same thing.
wow.
It did, though, triple the length. Okay, so now, but now you're not playing games of like how many calories I burned. You're playing games of personal preference, time. Like, those are all important distinctions for the person, but they're not actually relevant, really. Well, they're not super relevant to there. You could do the better example would be cycling. Like, if you cycled a mile in 2 different ways, it wouldn't matter, right? Like, you're going to get that the same way. So if you take that factor of like bouncing and landing on the concrete out of the equation, it's going to get there. So that's exactly what I mean when I say, like, don't just assume the harder, more stuck you got there. There. Now, that only is, of course, accounting for caloric expenditure. It's not counting for the other benefits and physiological things that happen with high heart rate, etc.
I was going to ask you about heart rate. Does that not play a role with that since you're working much harder to run?
Yeah, but you're having an elevated heart rate for shorter time, right? So it's the same thing, right? So it's elevated at 100 beats per minute for 15 minutes, or it's elevated at 200 beats per minute for 4 minutes. Like, I don't know what the math was got in that example, but you get the point. Because time domain goes down, the total amount of beats accomplished will
Yeah.
be basically the same. So
So
it's just a matter of now other factors, like, are there other adaptations you're trying to get? Are there practical considerations? Is there context? Is there reality? Like, all those things go into, then that's what makes a coach, right? This is why you can't at this point use things like ChatGPT for your coaching, because it's only going to be able to, like, well, equivalent there. It doesn't know the context of, well, actually right now, based on what's going to happen next week, the other program, based on what you woke up with last night, what we did yesterday for training. It's not at that level. Yeah, you can plug all those data in, but we'll understand things like, you know what, you don't have the technique now and how to run, and if you run like that at that pace, I think we're going to develop some injuries because your lower body movement is like all the other things that go into a really high level coach's decisions. It's not there. So at the AI example works really well right now because it's only going to be able to consider that surface level stuff and won't have the broader context of what you're trying to do or other things that make you unique, which makes having a personal coach, if they are good, so valuable to not only that workout, but that month, that year, 10 years, and that next 50 years where you're really trying to go and everything else going on in your life.
This is dynamite. And this, aside from building the friendship, this is the exact reason why I wanted to have you on for our listeners, is because there's a lot of misconceptions and there's a lot of things that maybe society or whoever we kind of built up that we think are what's really what, but then you go deep below the surface. No, that's actually not true. Here's how you could be more optimal and effective. And this is improving lives, this conversation right here. So thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. It's what I do, man. It's what I get excited about.
I know it is. I could tell. I want to ask you a couple more things before we land the plane. Selfishly, I want to ask you this. I see you talked about protocols for endurance training. Running is a big part of my life. I'm training for the Brooklyn Half Marathon next week, and I love that, and I always love to improve. What are some protocols for endurance training? Maybe something I could sink my teeth into.
Yeah, in terms of training or recovery or nutrition or hydration or what aspects?
How about training and recovery?
Yeah, sure. So, in general, when you think about human movement and you do something like a half marathon, the easiest way to think about this is exactly what the gentleman I mentioned earlier, Dan Garner. He just took Mark Bell. So if you're familiar with Mark is a lifelong power lifter, lifelong performance enhancing drug user, open about a bodybuilder, power lifter in his 40s. Said, I want to drop all that and run the Boston Marathon. Dan, you have to do everything. Dan, do my drugs, do my nutrition, do my training, do my recovery, do my lift, and everything. And Dan's like, holy crap, I got to take this dude who's been 300 pounds his whole life, squatted for forever, squatted 1,000 pounds, and try to get him to run Boston Marathon. And he just did. He finished it. And he did a great job. He run it fast, but it doesn't matter, right? So let's take a step back and look at what they did. You have a couple of things to pay attention to. Are you more concerned with running it fast or just completing it? In your particular case, you know you can complete 13. That's not a concern. You're trying to go faster, I assume, right? So what kind of a time frame are we looking at? Imagine you're hour and a half, kind of 90 minute, something like that.
Well, so since yes, the last one I read New York City half a couple weeks back was about 134. I know we could do much better.
Boom. So I pretty much nailed it, right? Hour and a
Nailed
half.
it.
Got it.
Nailed it.
All right, got it. I've done this before. All right, so now we're going to break you down. And I'm going to walk you through and say, hey, let's figure out why you aren't running this thing in 70 minutes. What is it? And we would go through everything of you, including, is it something as mundane as your fueling strategy in the race? Is it your hydration strategy in the race? Maybe not. Is it your warm up? Is it your taper? What are you doing the day before, the night before, the week up? Is it an overall training volume? Is it too high? Is it too low? Is it in different phases? So do you not have enough foundational aerobic stuff? Do you not have enough high intensity stuff? Are you not fast? So let's break this down. World record marathon, call it 2 hours. It's there plus or minus, right?
Hmm?
You're talking, again, plus or minus a 4-minute and change mile, right? If you actually break this thing down, do you know how fast those people run a 100-yard dash in?
No.
So you run the basic math there, right? You're talking a little bit over a 4-minute mile. That means you're running like a 70-second 400-meter dash. Most people on the planet cannot run a 70-second 400-meter dash one time, and they're going to do that 100 continuous ones, right? That also means, so the same token, they're running like a 12-second 100-meter dash continuously, right? Most people cannot run under a 12-second one time. My point is, those people are blazingly fast. If you are a 220, 230 or lower marathon runner, you are exceptionally fast. You would smoke most people in the world in a 40-yard dash. You would trash them, right? They're incredibly pure fast. People think they're endurance, and they are. But they're, again, blazingly fast human beings. So we would run that analysis. It's like, how fast are you? Like, are you not fast enough? Are you having to, in order for you to run the pace we need you to run a 70-minute half marathon, are you having to run at 90% of your max speed? Well, that is not an adaptation. That's not an endurance issue, because no one's going to run at 90% of their max speed that long. That's unrealistic. We need to get you faster, so that same pace is now 80% of your max speed. Could be a pure peak power, could be so I want to know your 40-yard dash. I want to know your peak velocity. I want to know your acceleration, but mostly peak velocity, right? Now I'm going to get into efficiency. How efficient are you? Are you fast and you have good endurance, but you're really inefficient with your mechanics? How are you breathing is a huge one. I want to look at your actual breath mechanics, physically of your rib cage, your dynamics. And I want to look at your breath strategy. I'm going to look at your VO2 max, of course, but I'm going to look really at your how you handle different fuels, right? I want to look at your CO2 tolerance. This is a huge aspect of it. We're looking at all those things. And we haven't even got into things like, do you just shit the bed mentally on race day, right? Like, do we need a sports psychologist in here? Are you putting too much pressure on yourself? Like, is this a sleep issue? And then now we're just on like race day stuff. Now we're backing up and looking again. Well, what's the total, this is called allostatic load or allostasis. What's the total stress load on your body? You said recovery. You want to talk about training recovery. Okay, great. I got to know everything going in the system to know everything coming out of the system, right? So I want to see when you say you don't recover, why? Is this a sleep issue? Is this a training issue? Is this a nutrition? Is this hydration? That's sort of why I asked, hey, like which one of these areas do you want to start? Because it could be, the answer could be anywhere. And this is exactly what I was referring to earlier when I said I'm finding that performance anchor and I don't know where it's going to be. Some people say, let's give me a different training program. Like, great, I don't do that personally. Like there's 1,000 other people. Awesome. Like I only want to do it if I can look at the whole package because it might be a training issue, but it might have nothing to do with training. It could be the fact that you're just not fast enough and your gut isn't trained enough to handle enough fluid to get to our training. So we got to train your gut up to have more fluid in it, or we got to train your gut up to get more carbs in. Or if carbs are not a great answer for you, or if this type of carb is, or recovery. Maybe recovery, last thing, here's what I'll say. When you think about, remember, stress is needed for adaptation. So we need adaptation. We got to shave 20 minutes off that half, man. Like easy. We got to get that thing done. No questions asked. You put it down as a goal. We're going to get it done. There's just no other option. It's not how we operate. We operate as there is no option besides success. So we have to figure out then why we aren't getting the adaptation. In order to do that, we have to go backwards into the stressors. And the stressors get broken into two major categories for us: visible stressors and hidden stressors. Visible ones are ones you tend to see and feel. I drank beer last night. I felt tired today. I lost focus today. I was sore. I didn't sleep last night. I didn't eat the meal plan. Visible things. But hidden ones are ones you will not know. So these are things that are causing equal or more stress on the total system, but you don't necessarily feel them directly, right? So this could be an immune issue. This could be a micronutrient deficiency. This could be a hormonal imbalance. Your cortisol to DHEA ratio could be slightly up, could be too high, could be too low. Something is happening there. The reason this matters is because of the old analogy that the stress bucket's only so big, right? And if you put more stress on top of that, it overflows. Well, if it's already preloaded 65% with things you didn't know, hidden stressors, then you only have another 35% you can add on and it keeps overflowing. So if I can carve out 15 or 20% of those hidden stressors, I've added 15% to your trainability and I didn't do shit, right? I didn't do anything to your training program, but all of a sudden you're just like, damn, same training, I'm recovering faster. I didn't recover anything. I just took these things off your foot off the brake. I got these hidden stressors out of here. I didn't increase the size of your stress bucket. I didn't improve your physiological resilience, which is actually something we can directly measure. I didn't do any of those things. We just got those hidden stressors out of the equation. So this could be anything from all that advanced physiological testing. It could be something like what we do with our in-home sleep studies with absolute rest. So we're coming in and easy examples of this are, it's fairly common for us to find things in the sleeping environment that are causing all kinds of sleep issues and people had no idea. I look at my Oura ring, I get good sleep, I'm getting a 90%. Great. And we actually run a full sleep study on you in your room, full EEG scanning, EOG scanning, and we're seeing some concentrations of something in the environment is throwing your sleep completely off, right? And you think you're getting it there, but they can't actually directly analyze sleep stages like we can with the full, again, clinical grade sleep study done in your bedroom. And we see some stuff and boom, we make changes year after year. So this is like why we run the system. I know, again, like you're like hoping for like a direct answer, but that's the honest reality of how we go after these things. And that's what we would do. And we would find what's holding you back the most. We pull that thing out and then year times would take off.
I just want to say I was not hoping for a direct answer because I know you're a storyteller and this is what makes the most awesome conversations, brother. And I want to acknowledge you for something. It's one thing if you're smart, and it's one thing if you put a lot of effort into your craft, but you're so lit up when you talk about stuff, and it's contagious, and it's awesome. I'm just curious off the cuff. Do you run?
No, no, no. It never was particularly interesting. I played every sport in high school for the most part. I played college football. From there, I competed in Olympic weightlifting for many years, and then from after that, for many years, I competed in combat sports and jiu-jitsu and things like that. So running never fit the bill for me. Like either, I guess the way I'd say is I'm more interested in the complex solving of somebody else in front of you, and
I
just never got into like that thing. So nothing against it. That's just not my
Yeah,
jam.
you could 4 years ago before I started running marathons, you couldn't pay me to run, and now I'm paying to run. I
Sure,
just love how mental it is. It's for me, it's like
totally.
a metaphor for life, that voice in your head. This is so much fun, brother. We'll land the plane with this final nugget. I know you often talk about blood chemistry, and to
Mhm.
be honest with you, I'm not sure. So I imagine the audience is curious too. What exactly is that, and why is it something we should pay attention to?
Yeah, so this is a really complicated one. The world is clearly moving towards a place of precision. I call it precision medicine again. I don't do medicine. Precision nutrition, precision medicine. It's all these things. The only way to really get a grip on that for you, for your unique physiology, is some sort of biomarker, and there's lots of ways to go about this. When we say blood chemistry, I'm referring to a basic blood draw and potentially urinalysis, like you would get in a any medical thing. Most people have had these done, right? So you go in and for your annual checkup, you get some blood work done, and they're going to measure 15 or so biomarkers. And what they're generally looking for, do you have diabetes? Is your blood cholesterol completely off whack, or do you have some other marker? And again, they're looking at typically like 15 or 20, and they're looking at just big risk factors of disease. Well, when we do that, we're going to look at several hundred. And we don't do it from the perspective of risk factors. We do it from the perspective of optimal performance. So we've done so many thousands of athletes at this point. We have a very good sense of where you need to be for your optimal performance range. And so, as a quick example, if you were to go to LabCorp or Quest and something like that, nothing against those companies, and they get a blood draw, they're going to give you back a report. They're going to say, hey, your blood glucose is within 85 to 110 milligrams per deciliter or whatever. And they're going to tell you if that's high, low, or whatever. Well, that high, low range is coming from things like the Mayo Clinic, which have giant databases that are almost exclusively built on people that are there for treatment for something that's gone wrong. So the point is that reference range is what we call that, is not the reference range for optimal human performance. It is a giant range of here's what you don't want to be in for sick people. And that's not particularly helpful. So what we do is we use a combination. There's tons of literature. And so when you look at all biomarkers, blood chemistry is the one I talk about the most because it is by far the most scientifically established of any of them. Stool samples are really hitting, like there's lots of missing science there. There's lots of stuff that's good, and there's lots of garbage in that, right? So like but blood chemistry is extremely well established. You're talking about tens of thousands of scientific studies on each marker there. So you have a lot of ground to stand on. So um, if you want to get a good sense of what's going on there, I generally would recommend ordering a couple of things. One is called a CBC, and the other is a CMP, so complete blood count, cardiometabolic panel. And that's going to be about 40-ish markers or so. And even if you don't know what to do with those or interpret them, don't worry about it. It's fine. Your doctor probably won't, though. They'll probably look at it and say, oh, Craig, you're fine. No, great here. Don't worry about it. You still should do it for your personal records, and you should do it every year. Twice a year is absolutely more than sufficient. Red blood cells take 2 to 3 months, or 3 to 4 months to turn over, so you don't really need to do it every 6 weeks. Like unless you, it's almost totally useless. Twice a year for most people is absolutely sufficient. Once a year is fine. If you're 25 years old, 30 years old, 30, cool, but do it every year because you want to build this database that says what does your physiology look like. Boom. And if you can make one quick note on that thing as you do it, just had my kid 6 months ago, started a new company on that thing, whatever the thing is, right? Just so you can remember 4 years back and go, God, that was a weird blip right there. Oh, that's right. That's just when we started the new company. That's when we moved. A little bit of just tiny bit of context. If you want to do detailed notes and stuff in your, like, that's great. But a little bit of context there. And why this matters is not now per se, although I can explain a situation why it can help right now a ton. But really, again, it's 4 or 5, 10 to 15 years. What if you get cancer? What if something pops up and a physician goes, whoa, is that normal for you? And you're like, I don't know. You don't have any idea. You can go, well, hold on, let me pull up my last 10 years. And he can look and go, oh, yeah, it looks like it's been like that for 10 years. I think that's actually fine for you. Or, oh, wow, this is triple what it used to be. Or here's a trend. It's going up, 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 up the last 7 years. Let's stop this right now before it gets there, and then whatever myths doing. In addition, with things like hormone therapies being so popular right now, one of the things that every physician is going to look at is say, like, okay, what are your symptoms? You say, oh, I'm tired, energy, focus, blah, 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 blah. And then they're going to go, well, what's your testosterone? Well, the testosterone range of normal is like 300 to 1300 on a typical unit, right? Which means, like, if you come in at 500, yeah, if you want to call it low and get CRT, you can. That actually might be normal for you. Might be totally fine. You might feel amazing. I've had pro athletes that walk around at 1,000, no problem. I've had them work on at 350 and are crushing, absolutely annihilating, world champions, just world beaters, fighters. 350 is normal for them, right? If you don't know what's normal for you, you don't have any idea if you actually do that. Because what a physician will not be able to do is look back and go, hey, look, you said your symptoms started about 2 years ago, right? Yeah. Okay, great. Well, when we looked at your past 12 years, your testosterone hasn't changed. So the symptoms have been caused by something else. So we may not want to go down this hormone route right now. Not throwing it out, but let's do something else. Let's go looking at somewhere else. Let's look at your sleep. Maybe you've had something happen. You broke your nose. Oh, great. Now you're not, whatever the case may be. If they don't, they just go, well, yeah, I mean, I guess it is moderate to low. You want hormones? Great, here you go. And I can't tell you, my man, I cannot tell you how many people have come into Rapid from hormone therapies. Just like, oh yeah, I went on TRT, felt amazing for 6 weeks, 6 months, and then felt horrific. Yeah, great, because someone just gave you a hormone, a very effective, extremely effective hormone with very minimal care and concern, because they're pretty safe and they're all those things. And again, I'm not anti any of those things. You're just not getting a lot of care there, and that can be some real serious consequences. So we've had to bring people back up for non-drug ways a ton. Because they're not pulled off them properly, or they go on them and they decide themselves to stop and don't even tell their doctor. So it's not the doctor's fault. It's like, tell me, you can't do that. Like, you cannot go on those things. Same thing for women. We've had a ton of this with HRT stuff, or for perimenopause and things like that. So you just want to have all those records at a minimum. The last thing I'll say, and I know I'm going on and on here.
No, all good, brother. I love this.
All right, for you right now, there is so much data and so much science on actionable steps from blood chemistry. Right now, the problem is few people really know how to interpret those things. And so if you can find somebody who's qualified, then you can get a ton, and you can get real performance enhancement. We're actually deep in this right now, because it's we got enough time to do this and make changes before the NFL season starts. The draft just happened. People know where they're at. Contracts are happening. So tons of people are rolling right now. Our PGA golfers have a little bit of a break before the next major happens. So we're pretty busy in the thick of this right now. But this is a real performance advantage. Huge. If you know what you're doing. And so that's one place to go about it. But again, even if you don't have access to that or can't afford that stuff, if you just get your insurance, whatever your insurance to cover, get him to get that CBC, CMP, and if you can get anything else, I want a full hormone panel, and make that argument, even if you've got to pay out of pocket $300, and that's just, that's everything you got. It is worth it, not for now, and it's going to feel like you're wasting your money, but it's going to be worth it over time. Last thing I'll say.
I love
Sorry.
it. Don't stop.
because these things are so specific to one time point, one snapshot, right? When I take your testosterone right now, it's funny. I could get it in it. I literally just had all this done this morning. I got a hole in my arm still. Yeah. Pull all the blood, right? It's only telling me my testosterone. It's only going to tell me my red blood cell width, like all those things this morning. Now, some of those are very stable. This is the classic example, HbA1c, people have heard of, right? It's a pretty good representation of your blood glucose the last 90 days. It doesn't really matter what you did this morning. You look at something like cortisol, though. Cortisol is influenced by the seconds before that blood was taken. Okay, so some things are hyper uh, responsive to the current environment, and some of them are like, you can do whatever you want and it ain't gonna change. Okay. Because of that, though, you don't want to get overly excited about any one blood draw, happy or bad, right? Because there's normal variation. Now we're not even talking about the variations and things like testosterone is not stable throughout your day. It's what we call diurnal, which means it goes up and down at different parts of the day. And so if you had one blood draw at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then next year when you got it, it happened at 7 in the morning, you might be up or down just because of that's your normal daily rhythm for it to move. And so don't overinterpret these things. And so the best way you can handle this is try to give yourself a routine. You know, when you get your blood draw done, do it under the same circumstances. Don't work out the day before. Always do it fasted. Try to do it at the same time of the day, ideally same day of the week, right? Because one thing that happens is your Mondays are this way, your Tuesdays are this way, your Thursdays are this with your work or whatever. So now all of a sudden, like your Thursdays are your hard day, and your Mondays are your meeting days, and your Tuesdays are your creative days or whatever, right? And you're doing blood draws on different things. There's going to be some subtle differences there for like stress hormones, right? So just try to create the same situation year after year. Write it down. I do this, I do this, I do this. Don't, do the birthday meal the night before, and just try to keep it fairly stable. And that's going to get you close enough over years and years and years. Those random variations will wash themselves out and you're going to be fine. So keep that routine stable and don't overly interpret, especially if you don't know what you're doing, any individual data point on any blood draw. You want to see patterns over time is what really matters if you don't know what you're doing in this analysis.
This is so valuable. To be honest with you, I didn't realize that cortisol, the stress hormone, is affected in the blood. And this might be a silly question, but what about dopamine, the one that makes you feel happy? Can you see that in the blood?
You wouldn't be able to measure that on a basic blood chemistry test. That's so without getting too far down the road here. So there's some things that are measured best directly themselves, right? So the actual enzyme. There are some things that's actually better to measure their upstream or their downstream metabolite. And this is why there's actually, when you talk about cortisol, there's 3 ways you can measure that: urine, saliva, and blood. And there's pros and cons to all those. So you really have to know what you're doing. And this is why you also shouldn't go to like a random, I won't even call out a naturopath, or like there's some incredible ones. So I don't want to like label it anything bad, but they could sell you on anything they want because they can take it the wrong way, overinterpret it, and you're like, oh my god, well, I came back, my cortisol's all over the place. I guess I have adrenal fatigue. You don't have fucking adrenal fatigue. Like, that's not a thing. You can have cortisol dysregulation, but you don't have adrenal fatigue, and you certainly don't have it from a really poorly one-time point spit test. Like, that's not a legitimate way to diagnose something like that. So yeah, like you can be tricked into thinking a lot of things are happening when they really aren't. Any of the things like that we measure, we're going to do it multiple times to get a real good sense. So like, for example, cortisol, we're going to measure potentially dozens of times to get a real good sense of what's going to happen. We're going to measure it multiple times throughout the day. When you first wake up, 30 minutes later, multiple time points throughout the day prior to sleep. And we're going to do that a bunch. We're going to do it. There's ways, again, you can measure it, saliva, urine, and blood, and get a real much better sense of what's actually happening instead of relying upon one single time point.
You make this stuff so digestible, no pun intended. So thank you for that. Just curious, but if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I just about almost exactly a month ago, just turned 40.
40 years young, just getting warmed up.
Yeah.
I just turned 38 about 2 weeks ago. Are you a Taurus, or that's before that?
My birthday is on April 11th. That's as far as I could tell you there. I think that's an Aries.
Yeah, understood.
Right, yeah.
And last question: do you drink alcohol?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. When you answer that question, it is, do I drink every night? No. Do I drink every week? No, for sure. I don't. I would say if you want to put a number on it, like in terms of amount of drinks per month, somewhere between like, I'd say 2 to 6 per month.
No big deal. Yeah.
I haven't had. I'll put it this way: we're actually going through a phase right now. Our entire company, thank you, Dan, decided like last October to do a whole company-wide physique transformation, right? And I was like, great. I've never really trained for physique ever in my life. It's always been performance and, you know, hitting a golf ball farther and like all those things, right? Like that kind of performance. But Dan's always been a physique. So I'm like, good, let's do it. Let's for the first time, let's try to get as jacked as I possibly can. I also haven't tried to lose a bunch of weight in a long time. I'm naturally a smaller guy. I played college football, 175 pounds, something like that, right? So I was always trying to get bigger my whole life.
Mhm.
So I've done a bunch of weight cutting stuff in the past, but it's been a long time. So I was like, okay, great. Let's try to lose some weight. So we've been on this like 9-month journey, but I finished actually in like 3 days. So I'm pretty close. So the last 3 months or whatever, it's been like a very, very restrictive diet. So I was at the Hollywood Bowl, watching Richie Gervais last weekend,
Nice.
and for sure had a couple of glasses of champagne,
Good for
no
you.
question, right?
Yeah.
But prior to that, I don't know, probably been a couple of months I had like Annie.
It's
I
pretty.
will also not, I will not hesitate to drink an entire bottle of wine like over the course of a weekend. If it's like, I'm
Yeah.
actually going to Japan in a couple of days for some stuff, and like I will drink on the plane, whatever. So um, it's not a thing for me to go months without any, but I have no qualms with 2 or 3 drinks in a night. Like probably not much more than that at this point because I'll just feel terrible.
Yeah.
I don't have any hard fast rules on it.
Fair enough. I'm kind of selfishly happy that you said that because me too. I like to stay as healthy as I can and on fire and clear and train all that. But
Yeah,
on the weekends after a long week, my fiance and I like to have a cocktail on a Friday night. No big deal.
it's not. Yeah, no big deal at all. If we go out to dinner, we have 2 small kids. So if I get a chance to go out, leave them behind,
Yeah.
100% the wife and I are 100% getting some sort of cocktail, like
Gotta carry
zero
you home.
questions asked. No, it's just like we're gonna get one cocktail for sure, and then I'm definitely having wine with dinner. And so like it's pretty much like I'm going for two and like that or one, something like that. But if
Understood.
I'm not driving, probably be rare to have three. Like definitely no more than that. Just because not because I'm like worried about my health. Just like I don't handle alcohol particularly well physically, so I'll be super hungover the next day and waste the whole day. And so like
Understood.
it's like I'm
I,
not
I
here.
I love the transparency and the vulnerability about that. It's just a
Yeah,
big
man.
relationship. I can guarantee that. The audience is breaking out between 5 and 6 million, and they're very loyal and engaging. What's the best way for them to support you, and what are you most excited about right now?
Yeah, sure. If you want to follow along with stuff, Twitter and Instagram at Dr. Andy Galpin or this science communication for me. Like I don't really market or do things like that. It's just like you want to hear about the science and stuff that I'm into. It's there. I don't really post family stuff or anything like that. So it's pretty much that. If you want those educational videos, those are all on YouTube. You want to work with us, rapidhealthreport.com, I think is thing. If you got Google me, you'll
We'll put
find
it in
it.
the show notes.
Yeah. Our sleep company, absoluterest.com, is by far the world's most advanced sleep system. That's out of control with the technology we have over there. You can check that out. And then I'd say the last thing is we have, we still engage in science and we do human performance science. And so if any folks need charitable donation write-offs and want to support science, we're actually looking for some funding support for a couple of projects, specifically in female athletes and birth control, trying to look at some of the physiological things happening there and if there's some health detriment. So that project, we actually want to do a number of projects in female athletes and female health. So if that stuff is of interest, we can't get federal funding for that. We can't get into, I don't want to take industry or supplement funding. So this is only going to work if we get donations. So if anyone's looking to do something like that, and then we have some other projects like that. So if you guys like supporting human performance research, you can contact me and let me know. And that's all. Our people will give you the tax
Yeah, we'll
feedback and all
put it,
that. But
we're gonna put it all in the show notes. This was so much
yeah,
fun. Hang on for 1 second. I want to connect with you after. Dr. Andy, I want you to know you the definition of precision, wisdom, and unbelievable passion for what you do. I could personally guarantee your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless, juicy nuggets today.
appreciate it, man. And I appreciate you taking the time to write your intro and outro, man. It's a big deal. It matters.
That was so much fun, Doc. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you for like just teeing up all that stuff too. For you don't need to do that. You can also trim that shit down if you want. If you're like, man,
No, I
Like
will
too much
not,
time.
because it was awesome. And you're
All right.
very passionate, and our listeners are going to love you. I know we have some mutual friends, stuff like that. I want to support you. I want to build a friendship. Let's stay connected.